without fear, you can't have courage, because courage is looking fear in the eye and saying, no matter the fact that I'm scared or the potential danger to myself, I'm still going to step forward into this situation. And it's not to say that you're weak for having fear. It's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful instinct we have in us as human beings is fear. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. I'm talking about men's mental health today, and there is an episode, or I think it was a podcast episode where Andrew Tate was on there, and I know I talked about some of the stuff Andrew Tate was talking about maybe a few weeks ago at this point, but ultimately, I'm kind of highlighting some of the things because I know he's a very controversial figure. And as I mentioned in my first take on some of the things that he's said, there are some things that are very valuable. And then there's some things that just kind of like are his opinion and should be left at that. Like, you don't have to agree with everybody's ultimate opinion. I think there's a lot more to him than I think meets the eye also. And I also think that he's trying to present a very founded and staunch position on masculinity, partly because he believes it, but partly because it also gets him clicks. It also gets him people like me fucking talking about him because people are asking me about this shit and all that stuff. So, I mean, he's doing a good job marketing himself in a lot of different ways. That being said, he did discuss something on mental health. And I mean, granted, I don't know his background in really understanding mental health. I don't know his background in any form of education around mental health, period. But one of the things that stuck out to me was he made the comment of men's mental health could be solved by honor. I kind of like sat with that, could honor and courage and pride, which pride is a double-edged sword, but could honor and courage and pride be components to solving mental health? I don't know you can really give a blanket statement like that. Again, like controversial things, they become clickbait. But at the end of the day, I think honor would give a lot more if men had that honor in themselves, and in their belief systems and in the man that they are and how they present themselves to the world. When they have honor in that, they have honor in how they show up. They have honor in their word. They have honor in their value system. It negates a lot of negativity about yourself, but it also creates a window of harsher criticism, because that honor can really, like, full disclosure here, I believe men need more honor in today's world. That is not like, get this twisted. But I think that you have to have an awareness around honor. You have to have an awareness of when is honor causing you to have high levels of self-criticism. And in that self-criticism, men can go down an even darker path in mental health in which they're actually struggling more. So we have to understand the limitations of honor in that capacity, but then also understand its value to holding us to a set of standards that we're constantly trying to achieve. When that standard is not met, or when we fall short of the level of honor that we intrinsically hold valuable to ourselves, we have to also give ourselves grace. And I think the balance of honor and grace is where you can see a lot of mental health maybe prevented or improved, and negativity prevented. But you can also see a lot of awareness and self-regulation done in that balance. So when he talks about honor, I'm a huge advocate for this. And I think men need to embody some form of honor code within themselves, however they develop that, whether it's through their family value system, whether it's through their own development, through experiences in life, whether it's through the way that they view other men that have kind of been influences in how they've developed their own masculinity. In any case, however you look at honor, wherever you've gathered it from, I think men need to present that form of honor. I think honor is what kept men very strong in the past. I think a lack of honor today is not necessarily tied as much to mental health as it is tied to the deterioration of strong men within society. When you lack honor, you lack a stance, you lack a position, you lack a boundary. And what I see today is men lack boundaries because of the fact that they don't have honor, and because of the fact that they don't have integrity, and because of the fact that they're devoid of situations in which real courage is engaged. I think all of those things are components to the deterioration of masculinity. Do I believe that is a mental health problem? I don't know that I agree with all that, and I don't think that that's the deterioration necessarily of mental health. I think that's more of the food that we're eating. I think that's more of the information that we're receiving from society, and the expectations from society, and the constant berating of negative information from social media. I think those are more contributing factors to the negativity or the decline in mental health. But when it comes to men in particular, I think that it's not necessarily the effect that it would have on mental health, but more the effect it would have on strong masculine figures within society. So long as that honor and that code is held to a positive standard for not only that man, but for the people that he's influencing. On top of all of that, when you have honor, you start to, you can engage in courage. So this is not something that's talked about very highly. I don't know that I've heard any guy really talk about this, because there's a level of, so first off, we have to discover that fear and courage are two in the same. Right. And I had a great conversation with Tony Blauer about this. He'll be on the show pretty soon, up and coming. Can't wait for you guys to listen to that episode. But Tony and I got into this conversation because he's got his program called No Fear, which is KNOW, fear. And he and I are under the same belief that without fear, you can't have courage, because courage is looking fear in the eye and saying, no matter the fact that I'm scared or the potential danger to myself, I'm still going to step forward into this situation. Now, courage can look that way in many situations in life. It's not necessarily physical, the threat of physical danger or harm. It can be even having fear to go up to a woman because you've been shut down before and you're placing preconceived notions and limitations in that interaction. So you have fear, but standing up in that fear and saying, I'm going to go forward and take a shot and still engage with this woman, is a level of courage, right? And courage has its own gradations within life, obviously from bodily harm all the way down to something as simple as asking for a raise in your job. Courage can take place in all of those settings and at different value sets within those settings, as far as the potentiality of loss of life or limb, right? And so when we look at courage, it is always in conjunction and relation to fear. And with honor, courage is easier to be present within a man because of the fact that he's holding himself to a standard in which he does not want to succumb to fear. So this is all in a point to say that it's not necessarily mental health I am so much believing that honor or courage is going to improve. It is more or less, I think, that masculinity in and of itself would improve based upon men gaining honor and inherently holding more to the value of courage because of said honor. And then also knowing that factor of fear and embracing fear, because fear, anybody that tells you that they don't have fear, there's not very many people that actually walk this world that don't have fear of something. And it's not to say that you're weak for having fear. We all hold it. Hell, I did a speech just recently at an event. And although I've spoken tons and tons of times on podcasts in front of people, on news outlets and things like that, it still spikes up in me that sense of like fear before you're going to go on stage, because of the fact that you're delivering in front of people and you're delivering from rehearsed information that you've put into your mind. Not only that, but you're also in the ability and presented with the position of being flexible within that talk, especially when you don't have something guiding you like, PowerPoint or notes, right? And you're making sure you're engaging with the crowd. There's a lot of things that go on with that. And so I can tell you right now that fear still comes up for me, even in that, even though I've dealt with being in combat, even though I've dealt with high stakes protection, like all of those things, but fear still comes up in that capacity. And it has to do with me wanting to present the best information, to be somebody who's accessible, to be somebody who can deliver, but also to be in honor and integrity with my words and to not misstep on that or lose my train of thought. So there's a lot that's involved in that. But at the end of the day, courage is still getting on the stage and delivering that speech, delivering that message. None of us are devoid of it, right? We all should be like, yeah, I got fear, and that's okay. I think that is a big piece to what makes us human as well. And you guys have heard me talk about this. It's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful instinct we have in us as human beings is fear. It drives us to exceedingly high levels of potential when fear is present, because of the fact that we're wanting to deliver for some higher purpose, for some bigger purpose than just that moment, right? Like if you're preserving your life, that's a big motivator to deliver, and to deliver a high level of courage and deliver a high level of capability. And the same thing is true when you're doing something that is scary, is that higher level of capability and courage is invoked through fear. It is going to push us to want to step up and deliver and be game time players when fear is present. And so saying that you have fear isn't weak, number one, but saying that you have fear and then utilizing that to actually catapult you forward is something that is it's a talent, it's a skill, and it's powerful. It's incredibly powerful. So when I look at this, what he was saying, he also mentioned something around masculine essence. So guys, again, these are things where it's like you don't take everything with a grain of salt, and don't just perceive that somebody knows what they're talking about because they're aggressive in their posture or their words or their conviction, right? Like, what is masculine essence? There's nothing there that defines it. And as you guys know, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you'll remember the fact that masculinity does not transcend globally. It just does not. It did ancestrally due to the circumstances every single group on the earth was involved in, but it does not do that ever since pretty much the discovery of civilization and cities. We don't transcend masculinity. It just has not been proven. And more to the fact, it's been disproven that it transcends globally. So masculine essence is not anything that we have to really concern ourselves with, because it doesn't necessarily exist in my perception of masculinity. But what we can say is that, if we're using honor and courage, right? And I'll discuss pride here in a second, but if we're discussing honor and courage that helps to meet this masculine essence, quote unquote masculine essence, what I think we're really talking about here is that when you have honor and courage, you're fulfilling an ancestral tie to masculinity, because those were two things that were typically, at least courage, in my opinion. I don't know that I can say honor was, but courage was always tied with masculinity. I think it was one of the key features to ancestral masculinity that we all inherently were given and expected to have within every society globally, or within every tribe, right? Prior to civilization and like I said, the construction of cities and laws and everything. So when we look at that, we say, okay, it meets some form of ancestral desire within men. I would agree to that extent with that statement, but that's about as far as I would go with it. Now, he did say something I really, really value and I think was very powerful, and that is a trash output is what you give when you provide yourself with a trash input. This comes back to what we're talking about with information and food. So what I alluded to earlier is the way that it's consistent with the way that you are going to present yourself as a man. If you put in terrible information and you're not critically thinking about it and challenging it, but you're just allowing yourself to consume shit information, well, you're going to have a shit output of information, and you're going to have a shit output of intellectual conversation, right? So whether it be that you're not inputting any type of quality information, you're just kind of numbing out all the time on stupid shit, games and fucking TV shows, or whether you're inputting information from social media or news outlets that are basically out to condition your perception of the world instead of providing factual information, right? So you're allowing that information to penetrate your mind, process in your mind, and you're not challenging it or questioning it. You're just receiving it and then you're absorbing it. And that to my perception is a shit input, right? And that's where a lot of people are today. We saw that with the pandemic. We've seen that with politics today. People who spout off about Trump, they're basically regurgitating a narrative that is a false narrative about him. And it's unimpressive for people to do that. And so what happens when you question those people? Well, they have a shit output in the conversation because they can't defend a position when there's no facts to base their position off of. And so I agree with him. When you're putting in shit information, you're going to have shit information coming out, which makes you look like a fool. The other part is when we look at physically how we are showing up in the world, it's a big level of importance, I think, for men to present themselves physically strong and fit. You don't have to look like me. You don't have to look like a bodybuilder, but being physically strong and fit, if you present yourself that way to the world because you're doing an input of quality food and you're doing an input of quality time in the gym to work on your body, the output is going to reflect somebody who is confident, somebody who is strong, and it's also going to present somebody who is healthy. Those are all positive things for masculinity. For men in general, for people in general, it's a positive thing. But for men, it is something that is expected of us ancestrally, right? So back to the ancestral ties. It is expected of us to be physical, physically dominant for the desire of protection of the tribe. When you look back, that is something that does relate to us and that is expected. So whether or not society, the society you live in expects that anymore, intrinsically within us, cellularly within us, we've evolved from that mindset. And there probably is some form of like nagging, piece in your subconscious. It's like, hey, bro, you still need to like look fit. Like you should probably go to the gym. You should probably do something to stay healthy, right? Like this is where even people who are excessively overweight, they know they're overweight and they want to get quote unquote healthier. So they'll try diets and they'll try to eat salads all the time and all that shit. But that kind of intrinsically is there for us. And I think that if we listen to that more, again, that is a good input. So you are going to present a good output as a man, and the rest of the world is going to see that.